Religious liberty seats Christ beside Satan. The older church said a Catholic ruler may restrain public religious error. Vatican II says he may not. Satanism, Islam, and the myth of neutrality show what changed. By Chris D. Start with one simple case. A group of adults rents a hall in a Catholic country. It obeys the fire code and the zoning laws. It admits no children, commits no fraud, threatens no one, and disturbs no one. But it openly worships Satan and hands out literature urging baptized Catholics to renounce Christ. One question. It takes yes or no. May the Catholic ruler restrain that congregation solely because it publicly honors the enemy of God and endangers the souls of his people? The older Catholic rule says yes in principle. The ruler possesses the authority to restrain public attacks on the true religion. Prudence may tell him to tolerate the group to prevent a greater evil, but he possesses the authority. The rule stated by Vatican II says no, unless the group violates what the Council calls just public order. The congregation possesses a civil right not to be restrained in its public worship, teaching, organization, and recruitment merely because its religion is false. Read those answers again. Older rule, the ruler may restrain, but may prudently tolerate. Newer rule, the ruler may not restrain except within the limits of just public order. This is not a small adjustment in tone. The two rules give the legal claim to opposite parties. Under the older rule, the Catholic ruler has authority and may choose not to use it. Under the newer rule, the false worshipper has a right against the ruler. May restrain and may not restrain cannot govern the same act at the same time. That is the whole dispute. The rest is proof. This article will do three things. It will place the older teaching beside Vatican II's Dignitatis Humanae, Latin for of human dignity. It will test the newer rule first with Satanism and then with an actual mosque. Finally, it will show why the supposedly neutral state never remains neutral. In theory, it must protect the movement that will destroy it. In practice, it protects liberalism, its real public creed. This is not an argument for forced conversions, mob violence, or punishing every religious error. Faith cannot be forced. Due process matters. Broad toleration can be wise and sometimes necessary. None of that decides who holds the authority. Toleration means, I may restrain this but have good reason not to. A natural civil right means, you have no authority to restrain this on that ground. Confuse those two sentences, and the entire argument disappears into fog. The whole dispute in two words. May and may not state the older Catholic rule at full strength. Catholicism is not one spiritual product among many. If Christ is God, if he founded one church, and if he entrusted that church with the truth and the means of salvation, then the Catholic religion has a public claim no false religion can possess. Error does not become true, and false worship does not become good, because a sincere person performs it. That judgment does not erase the person's dignity. People have rights. Error does not. The real question is whether a person has a natural civil right to perform every peaceful act of false public worship, teaching, and recruitment against a Catholic ruler. The older answer was no. Aquinas holds the pieces together. An unbeliever who has never accepted the faith is by no means to be compelled to the faith, because belief depends upon the will. Yet in the same article he says, civil authority may restrain outward attacks such as blasphemies, evil persuasions, and open persecutions, Summa Theologiae Necessecum, Kirchen 10 and Church 8. There is no contradiction. The ruler cannot reach inside a man and manufacture supernatural faith. He can still judge outward public acts. A man cannot be forced to believe Christ. It does not follow that he must be given a public platform to recruit Christians away from Christ. The older teaching also built in prudence. Rulers may tolerate false worship when suppressing it would cause a greater evil, or toleration would obtain a greater good. God permits evils he could prevent. A Catholic ruler may sometimes do the same. Suppose, for example, that a Catholic ruler inherits a province with a large Protestant population after decades of religious war. Closing every meeting house tomorrow would reignite bloodshed, drive worship underground, provoke retaliation against Catholics across the border, and make peaceful conversion harder. The older rule allows him to tolerate those meeting houses. He does not declare Protestantism a God-given civil right. He judges that using his real authority at that moment would cause greater harm than forbearance. That is what toleration is for. The religious and civil common goods are not sealed off from one another. Religion teaches people what marriage, sex, children, authority, justice, life, and death mean. Those teachings form citizens, families, and laws. Different religions therefore produce different moral and civil fruits. A ruler need not pretend that every religious morality cultivates virtue or restrains vice equally well. Leo XIII said in Libertas that truth and goodness alone possess rights in themselves, that rulers may tolerate error for serious reasons, and that it is contrary to reason that error and truth should have equal rights. Pius X repeated the distinction in his 1953 address, Ci Riesce. What contradicts truth and morality objectively has no right to exist, spread, or act, but a higher and broader good may justify legal toleration. That is the old rule in one sentence. Public religious error has no right of its own, but people may be allowed to practice it when justice, prudence, or the common good requires toleration. The older teaching did not stop there. It said what the state should positively do. Leo XIII taught in Immortal Dei that rulers should publicly honor the true religion and must not place false worship on the same level, while still allowing toleration for grave reasons. Pius X stated the public duty in Quas Primus. Not only private individuals, but also rulers and princes are bound to give public honor and obedience to Christ. Now put Vatican II's rule beside it. Section 1 of Dignitatis Humanae says the Declaration leaves untouched traditional Catholic doctrine on the moral duty of men and societies toward the true religion and toward the one Church of Christ. That claim must be read fairly. Vatican II did not say every religion is true or morally equal, but saying the tradition remains untouched does not make it so. The operative rule appears in the next sections. Section 2 says the human person has a right to religious freedom in private and public. This right continues to exist even in those who do not live up to their obligation of seeking the truth and adhering to it, provided they remain within due limits. Section 3 says government exceeds its power if it presumes to command or inhibit acts that are religious. That is where the shoe drops. Inhibit means restrain. Section 3 says the government crosses the line when it restrains religious acts as such. Here, in Vatican II's operative text, is the may not restrain. Section 4 protects the public worship, teaching, organization, and witness of religious communities. It expressly includes erecting buildings for religious purposes, running schools and organizations, and arguing that religious doctrine should shape the organization of society and the inspiration of the whole of human activity. Section 7 sets the boundary at just public order. That includes protecting the rights of others, genuine public peace, and public morality according to the objective moral order. The phrase means more than quiet streets, but it still does not restore the older rule. Hold one case perfectly still. A missionary of a false religion rents a hall in a Catholic country. He preaches peacefully to adults and urges baptized Catholics to abandon the church. He uses no force, fraud, obscenity, or threats. He violates no one's civil rights and causes no riot. His only offense is that he publicly spreads religious error and leads souls away from the faith. May the Catholic ruler restrain him solely because his mission is false and harms the religious common good? The older rule says yes in principle. Prudence may counsel toleration, but the ruler possesses the authority. The newer rule says no. The missionary's immunity remains even though he rejects the truth, and public teaching and witness are among the protected acts. The stated boundary is just public order, not the full Catholic religious common good. One ruler, one hall, one missionary, one afternoon, two opposite answers. This is not one principle applied more gently. Under the old rule, the ruler holds authority and may forbear. Under the new rule, the false missionary holds a right against the ruler. The legal claim has changed sides. Pope Pius IX's 1864 encyclical Quanta Cura makes the conflict especially hard to hide. He condemned the claim that the best civil order recognizes no duty to restrain offenses against the Catholic religion, except where public peace demands it. Vatican II's public order includes more than peace, since it also mentions rights and public morality. But it still removes the older ground. Pius IX did not say the ruler must wait until false religion produces an independent injury to liberal public order. Dignitatis Humanae does not say the ruler may restrain public religious error because it attacks the faith and damages the religious common good. That missing ground is the dispute. John Courtney Murray, one of the Declaration's chief intellectual architects, wrote after the Council that the course of the development between the Syllabus of Errors, 1864, and Dignitatis Humanae Personae, 1965, still remains to be explained by theologians. Murray's commentary. Murray believed the development was valid. He still admitted that the path between the two teachings had not been explained. Spain shows that this was not merely a dispute among theologians. Its 1945 Fuero de los Españoles protected religious belief and private worship, while prohibiting non-Catholic public ceremonies. In 1956, Spanish authorities seized Bibles and other materials from the British and Foreign Bible Society in Madrid because its work appeared to be Protestant proselytism, forbidden by Spanish law. House of Lords record. This was the peaceful missionary in real life. Then Spain's 1967 religious liberty law guaranteed the private and public practice of every religion and protected religious teaching by speech and writing. Its preamble quoted Dignitatis Humanae, said the Council's declaration made amendment of the older law necessary, and noted that the new wording had received the Holy See's prior approval. Spain remained officially Catholic, but public non-Catholic worship moved from prohibited to guaranteed. Protestants are not Satanists. That is precisely why the example matters. This was the new rule applied to the ordinary case, and the law itself named Vatican II as the reason. The Council announced continuity. Spain wrote the reversal into law. Neither the declaration nor its implementation showed how may restrain became may not restrain without the rule changing. Now, put Satan in the same hall, return to the opening case. The peaceful missionary now worships Satan by name. Nothing else changes. The older rule answers immediately. Devil worship possesses no right of its own. A Catholic ruler may restrain its public worship and recruitment because both oppose God, endanger the religious common good, and corrupt the civil good through their effects on belief and morals. He may still tolerate the group if suppression would cause greater harm, but the toleration comes from prudence, not from Satan's civil title. The newer rule reaches a fork. Dignitatis Humanae includes public morality and just public order. Fine. Does open devil worship violate public morality simply because Satan is evil and the worship is directed to him? If the answer is yes, the ruler may judge the religious act itself and restrain it because of what it worships. A mass and a black mass do not arrive at the counter with equal claims. That answer is sane, but it restores the older Catholic competence. The remaining question is only when prudence permits or requires toleration. If the answer is no, then the consequence is equally plain. A peaceful satanic congregation in a Catholic country possesses a natural civil claim against the Catholic ruler. The ruler must protect its public worship, teaching, organization, and recruitment while believing that all four serve the enemy of God. There is no third answer hiding in the word dignity, the very word displayed in the Declaration's Latin title. Suppose an apologist objects that most public Satanists do not believe in a literal devil. The Satanic Temple says exactly that. It uses Satan as a symbol of rebellion against authority. That fact changes nothing. Literal Satan worship has existed, and academic references describe forms of Satanism involving ritual worship or veneration of the biblical Satan or Lucifer. Sage Encyclopedia of the Sociology of Religion, Reuben van Loyck, Children of Lucifer. More importantly, a legal principle cannot depend upon the clerk guessing whether the worshiper is sincere. Give the group a literal creed if necessary. The same civil right claim remains. The symbolic version already proves enough. The Satanic Temple defends blasphemy as an expression of independence and lists a black mass and unbaptism among rituals its members have used. Aquinas named blasphemies and evil persuasions as outward attacks on the faith that rulers could restrain. Yet in 2023, a federal court ruled that a Pennsylvania school district had likely violated the First Amendment by revoking approval for an after-school Satan club because of its religious viewpoint. A later settlement required equal treatment and $200,000 in attorney's fees and costs. The point is not that the American Constitution claims to be Catholic. It is that equal religious liberty does what it says. Once religious truth is legally set aside, the Catholic school board official whose child walks those halls cannot prefer the church that offers his child salvation to a club named for the child's enemy. That is not a distortion of the rule. It is the rule made visible. The mosque makes it real. Satanism is the cleanest test because no Catholic can call it a religious good. Islam is the more practical test because it has people, money, institutions, buildings, law, and political confidence. This is not an accusation that every Muslim wants an Islamic state or that every mosque is a political operation. It is a refusal to pretend that Islam is merely a private spirituality. Classical Islamic law and political thought, rooted in Sharia, make claims about worship, family, law, public order, and government. Cambridge Overview. Dignitatis Humanae Section 4 protects the steps by which a religion becomes publicly established. It protects religious buildings, public teaching, schools, organizations, recruitment, and the attempt to shape society according to religious doctrine. Under Dignitatis Humanae, a Catholic state may not stop those activities merely because the religion is false and its success harms the Catholic common good. That consequence is no longer hypothetical. In July 2026, Archbishop John Wester of Santa Fe issued an official statement supporting a proposed mosque and community center in Albuquerque. He invoked Dignitatis Humanae, called the Muslims' claim a God-given and constitutionally protected right, and said defending it was a core element of Catholic teaching. He did not merely ask the government to avoid violence or discrimination. He said supporting construction of the mosque was consistent with Catholic tradition and urged the community to welcome it. This is not a traditionalist inventing an absurd consequence and blaming the council. It is an archbishop applying the council to an actual mosque. Now put his claim about tradition before the older record. In 1312, the Council of Vienne under Pope Clement V addressed Muslim public worship in territories subject to Christian rulers. Decree 25 described Muslim clerics publicly invoking Muhammad from mosques. It called the practice an insult to God's name, a disgrace to the Christian faith, and a grave scandal to the faithful. Then, with the Sacred Council's approval, it forbade the practice in Christian lands and placed Catholic princes under an obligation to stop it. The contrast could hardly be clearer. Clement V and an ecumenical council. Catholic princes must restrain a public Islamic practice because it offends God and scandalizes Christians. Archbishop Wester applying Vatican II, Catholics should welcome a mosque because its public worship is protected by a God-given civil right. Those are not the same principle adapted to different circumstances. The older rule says the ruler may restrain for a specifically religious reason. The newer rule says the worshiper has a right not to be restrained on that ground. Again, may restrain, may not restrain. Wester is right about the source of his conclusion and wrong about its pedigree. His position is a straightforward application of Dignitatis Humanae. It is not the rule taught at Vienne. Love the Muslim neighbor. Protect him from violence. Give him, not his religion, equal justice in court. Feed him when he is hungry. Shelter him when he is homeless, and preach Christ to him. Treat the man well. Do not pretend that charity requires honoring the error that keeps him from Christ. The modern drift does not always stop at legal toleration. In Nigeria, the Diocese of Yola admirably sheltered Christian and Muslim families displaced by Boko Haram. It built homes, a school, a clinic, and a church. Then the diocese used Catholic funds to build the Muslim residents a mosque. The bishop later invoked Vatican II's Nostra Aetate in defense. That crossed from toleration into sponsorship. The hungry man has a claim on Catholic bread. The homeless family has a claim on Catholic shelter. False worship has no claim on Catholic patronage. Now compare that Catholic eagerness with an Islamic state confident in its own rule. Saudi Arabia forbids every non-Muslim house of worship and the public practice of every religion other than Islam. No Catholic cathedral may rise in Riyadh beside the mosques. Saudi Arabia is not a poor or technologically backward country waiting for economic development to teach it liberalism. The World Bank classifies it as a high-income economy. Its policy expresses the public supremacy of Islam. Nor is the underlying principle merely Saudi. Bans on constructing new churches in Muslim cities form a well-documented strand of classical Islamic law, even though jurists disputed exceptions and rulers applied the rules unevenly. The contrast is brutal. Catholic leaders protect, welcome, and sometimes finance Islamic institutions. Confident Islamic governments decide whether churches may exist at all. The point is not that Catholics should copy every Islamic measure or use the same severity. It is that unilateral disarmament is not a principle of survival. If Catholics deny their own rulers any authority to protect Catholic public life, they should not expect every rival religion to return the favor. A creed without a spine eventually meets one with teeth. There is no neutral state. The neutral state is the great promise behind the modern rule. Government will not decide which religion is true. It will hold the ring while beliefs compete in a marketplace of ideas. The promise collapses in two directions. Imagine a peaceful religious movement that openly rejects religious liberty. It uses religious liberty to preach, organize, gain converts, and win elections. It promises that once it lawfully takes power, it will abolish equal religious liberty. It commits no violence or fraud. It simply preaches and wins. Must the neutral state protect it? If yes, the state must protect the movement organizing its lawful destruction. If no, religious liberty is not the highest rule. The liberal order is. Religion remains free only while liberalism permits it, and liberalism will withdraw that permission when its own rule is threatened. Either the neutral state protects its executioner, or it stops pretending to be neutral. Modern liberal states choose the second answer when the threat becomes serious. In 2003, the European Court of Human Rights upheld Turkey's dissolution of the Welfare Party, then the largest party in parliament. The court judged its proposed system of Sharia, Islamic religious law, incompatible with democratic society, and held that the state did not have to wait until the party seized power, provided the danger was real and near. The case involved more than peaceful worship. Party leaders had not clearly rejected force, and the court found an immediate political danger. Those facts matter, but they do not erase the lesson. A liberal court examined a program rooted in religion, judged it against the official constitutional order, and approved restraint before the program was carried out. That is civil authority, judging a public religious project according to a ruling creed. The liberal state therefore knows exactly how to defend a public truth. It simply chooses liberal democracy as the truth it will defend. It will not let every conviction compete forever. When the contest threatens liberalism, the referee puts on a uniform and enters the fight. This is sometimes called militant democracy. The name is refreshingly honest. Democracy does not submit its own foundations to endless debate. It treats them as the standards by which rival movements will be judged. The marketplace of ideas cannot rescue neutrality either. The famous American formulation came from Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes's 1919 dissent in Abrams versus United States. Holmes argued that the best test of truth is whether a thought gets accepted in market competition. But a market measures demand, not truth. Sales measure purchases. Elections count voters. Viral posts measure attention. None of them can tell whether Christ rose from the dead. Holmes later stated the moral price of his approach with unusual candor. If my fellow citizens want to go to hell, I will help them. It's my job. Holmes' Lasky Letters, Volume 1, pp. 248-249. A Catholic cannot turn that shrug into political wisdom. Every state ranks goods. Every state decides what counts as harm. Every state protects some beliefs and punishes some violations. A liberal state will restrain a movement that threatens democracy, equality, or the constitutional order. Yet under the religious liberty rule, it may not count peaceful recruitment away from Christ as an injury merely because souls are being led from the true faith. The state is not neutral. It has ranked liberal order above the religious common good and treated the danger of damnation as legally invisible. This exposes the real hierarchy. Christ's public rights may be set aside in the name of religious liberty. Religious liberty may be set aside when liberalism itself is in danger. Liberalism does not eliminate an establishment. It becomes the establishment. Spiritual harm is still harm. The modern argument survives by treating religious error as harmless unless it produces some separate civil injury. Scripture does not speak that way. Psalm 95:5 says, "For all the gods of the Gentiles are devils, but the Lord made the heavens." St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:20, "The things which the heathens sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, and not to God." That does not mean every pagan consciously intends to worship a demon. It does not mean every statement found in every false religion is false. A false religion may preserve belief in God, moral truths, fragments of revelation, and beautiful prayers. Truth remains good wherever it is found, but fragments of truth do not turn the false system into a second church or a safe road to heaven. The devil does not need every sentence to be false. He needs the decisive error to keep a soul from Christ. Salvation is not an examination on which a religion may score 90% and pass. Leo XIII teaches in Satis Cognitum that knowingly rejecting even one doctrine proposed by the Church as revealed by God destroys the principle of faith. That states the objective rule of belief. It does not judge the private guilt of every person born into error. No one is saved by religious error. A soul visibly outside Catholic unity can be saved only if grace joins him to Christ and his church before death, not because a separated religion offered another road. The fuller argument appears in Ignorance is Not a Sacrament. False religions are not equally false or equally dangerous. They need not receive identical civil treatment. Prudence may require very broad toleration. None of that creates a natural right of error as such. If recruiting a soul into Satanism is a real spiritual injury, the injury does not disappear when the recruiter uses a more respectable name. The reversal opens a trapdoor. Some defenders take the direct route. They say the older teaching was reformable, and Vatican II replaced it. That answer at least admits the reversal. It also opens a much larger wound. The older position was not an isolated policy written once by an obscure official. It runs through Quanta Cura, Immortale Dei, Libertas, Quas Primas, the older account of Christ's kingship, and the Church's public practice across centuries. If teaching with that pedigree can be reversed, while the reversing document says the tradition remains untouched, Catholics are entitled to ask what continuity means. This does not make everything short of a solemn definition disposable. The ordinary and universal magisterium can teach infallibly without issuing a new dogmatic definition. Reformable teaching may also be corrected, but correction is not magic. May restrain cannot be corrected into may not restrain and then declared unchanged. The danger appears when a teaching is called reformable only after it has been reversed. That turns reformable into a trapdoor beneath nearly every repeated Catholic teaching not already fenced off as definitive. If this method is legitimate, what stops a future document from preserving the words openness to life while permitting contraception in selected cases? What stops another from praising Catholic uniqueness while normalizing Catholic participation in false worship, or affirming marital indissolubility while admitting people publicly living in adulterous unions to communion? The last two are already buckling. A 2020 Vatican guide says Catholics must seek opportunities to pray with other Christians. The Buenos Aires criteria that Pope Francis called the only interpretation of Amoris Laetitia permits some divorced Catholics and second unions to receive communion even when continence is judged infeasible. The old words remain. The new exception does the reversing. Then continuity is printed on the label, and someone else is expected to explain the harmony later. That is why defenders work so hard to deny a rupture in religious liberty. Once one reversal of this size is admitted, Catholics naturally begin asking what else is waiting over the trapdoor. The strongest answers fail the fixed case. The first defense says, rights belong to people, not to errors. Catechism 2108 says religious liberty is not moral permission to believe error, but a civil right to immunity from coercion within just limits. That distinction is real and irrelevant to the fixed case. A person claims the right to perform particular public acts, false worship, teaching, organization, and recruitment. Saying who holds the right does not tell us which acts the right protects. The act is precisely what is disputed. The second defense says, public morality and the objective moral law provide the limits. Catechism 2109 says those limits must be applied according to the real common good and objective morality. Good. Now answer the question. May open devil worship be restrained because the object worshipped is evil? If yes, civil authority may judge the religious act by moral truth, and the old competence has returned. If no, the devil's peaceful congregation keeps its permit. Repeating public morality without choosing an answer is not a solution. The third defense says the government cannot judge theology. The older order did not make the ruler a pope. The church judges revealed doctrine. The ruler receives that judgment and applies it to civil matters, just as government relies on medical knowledge without becoming a hospital. Modern states already judge religiously grounded programs when their constitutional order is threatened. The welfare party case above is the liberal example. The European court upheld Turkey's restraint of an Islamic political program, because it threatened democratic order. The dispute is not whether judgment ever occurs, it is which truth guides the judgment. The fourth defense says religious liberty protects Catholics when they are a minority. It often does, and that protection is valuable. It proves broad toleration can be prudent under difficult conditions. It does not prove that false public worship possesses a universal natural right in every society. The final defense points to coercion that backfires and Catholic rulers who abused power. Both things have happened. Abuse proves the need for proper authority, due process, just law, and prudence. Backfiring may show that toleration is wise in a particular case. Neither proves the authority never existed. Every escape returns to the same question. May the Catholic ruler restrain the peaceful public attack on the faith because it is a public attack on the faith? The old rule says he may. The new rule says he may not. No amount of verbal padding makes those answers identical. There will be an establishment. The state cannot force supernatural faith, administer sacraments, or save a soul. It can still honor Christ, protect the Church's public mission, and refuse to treat organized attacks on the faith as goods carrying a natural civil title. That was the older rule. Its restraint came from justice, prudence, due process, and the common good, not from the fiction that the ruler has no religious competence until blood reaches the pavement. Catholicism claims to be the one religion revealed by God, the one church founded by Christ, and the ordinary ark of salvation. If those claims are false, Catholics should abandon them. If they are true, Christ does not enter public life as one equal preference beside every rival. Neutrality does not leave the throne empty. It hands the throne to whoever defines harm, writes the school books, licenses professions, distributes public money, and decides which convictions threaten the constitutional order. In the modern state, liberalism holds those powers. In a confident Islamic state, Islam does. Only Catholics seem trained to call public surrender a moral duty. Aquinas opens De Ente et Essentia with a warning borrowed from Aristotle. A small error at the beginning becomes a great one at the end. The error here is not prudential toleration. It is turning tolerated false worship into a natural civil right against a Catholic ruler. Once that premise enters the system, its consequences spread. Its fruits are already visible. Equal access rules used by organized Satanists, religious liberty claims pressed by Islamic institutions, militant defense of liberalism by liberal governments, and Catholic money spent on rival worship. These movements are not morally or doctrinally identical. Their shared advantage is simpler. Each is willing to use the public order to advance its claims, while Catholics are taught that public power must never take Christ's side. If that continues, harsher consequences will not arrive by accident. A people that disarms Christ's kingship cannot be surprised when a harder creed occupies the ground it abandoned. Every constitution expires. Every court closes. Every citizen dies. The soul does not. That is why temporal authority may not declare salvation irrelevant to the common good. Within the limits of its office and prudence, the state should protect and support the one true religion so that law helps rather than hinders the Church's work for souls. Return once more to the permit. Refuse it because of what the group worships, and you admit that religious truth and spiritual harm can justify civil restraint. Grant it, and the Catholic ruler must protect the devil's congregation, and by the same rule, the public teaching and recruitment of a mosque, all in the name of a neutrality that liberal courts abandon when their own system is threatened. Christ does not sit beside Satan at the counter because Catholics believe they are equal. He sits there because the clerk is forbidden to act on the difference. That is the practical effect of the new rule. Christ's kingship denied, his church disarmed, false worship protected by the state and sometimes financed by church officials, and the ruin of souls declared outside the ruler's concern. There is no neutral state. This one has an official creed, protected doctrines, teachers, courts, and punishments. It has everything an establishment needs except a God worth serving, because its supposed neutrality protects what leads souls away from Christ and treats their loss as no public injury. It is not merely empty, it is wicked.